folks, welcome back. So today we're going to look at an exciting arrival I had a couple days ago, which is the Shadowdark RPG that I backed on Kickstarter a while ago and was beautifully produced by Kelsey Dionne, who made loads of great adventures for 5th edition, or so I've heard, and then transitioned into making her own take on the old school Renaissance style of D&D. So OSR games are basically harking back to the elder days of Dungeons and Dragons back in the 70s and 80s. So before we got into the modern era of 3rd edition and onwards, where we had characters with lots of mechanical complexity, and the focus drifted from sort of underdog adventurers scraping through dungeon survival into stories of bigger heroes and long adventure paths and all that kind of stuff. And I think, I've enjoyed both of those styles with equal joy, honestly. I mean, I had a lot of time with 3.5 and Pathfinder that I enjoyed. I loved 4th edition. 5th edition is okay, but more about that later. And this game is based on kind of a combination of the basic / expert, or BX as it's known, era of D&D with some modern era conveniences and quality of life improvements like advantage and disadvantage from 5th edition, stuff like that. And the big thing that set this game apart, and I think helped drive it to such Kickstarter success, was that it really goes back to the dungeon crawling feel, where you're worried about your torches running out and your ammo rations and so forth, and especially your light sources running out. And that's a big part of this game, and hence the name Shadowdark. A lot of creatures, for example, will focus on removing or degrading your light sources, making it harder for you to act in the dungeon, putting you at disadvantage for various things. And so keeping the light around you is going to be really important. And the other side of it that's really unique is that back in the olden days, including when I was growing up with AD&D 1st and 2nd edition, when you were in a dungeon, there were kind of systems and procedures that you followed where you had to deal with stuff like light sources and manage them and manage your rations and stuff like that. And that's become increasingly less emphasized in modern editions. So this is kind of leaning into that older style where, you do have to care about your torches running out. You don't have lots of player races that immediately have dark vision or infravision or all those different kind of things that you got from sort of late 2nd edition onwards. Anyway, they produced a enormous amount of these lovely books. You can see it's smaller size compared to my hands here. It's about 5x9 hardback. It's got a lovely foil effect sort of cover with a really grim looking beholder, kind of heavy metal style. Nothing but this cool logo on the back. On the spine, you can see Shadowdark, a nice lovely font there. So it's really convenient to carry to games. The typeface, everything's really big and readable. The layout is beautiful, as you'll find with a lot of these OSR games, particularly, I would say this one and Old School Essentials, which I'll talk about in another video in the future at some point. They've taken the old days of D&D, cleaned it up, made it beautifully laid out and easy to understand, which it wasn't back in the day. So a lot of tables played the game in just whatever the hell way they wanted. And so we've now have this wonderful era where you can play modern D&D. It's very accessible. You can watch Critical Role. You can see all these, let's plays of Pathfinder 2 and all this kind of stuff. Or if you want, there are any number of excellently produced, beautifully laid out renditions of old school D&D. So every style of dungeon crawling and sort of high fantasy adventure is represented, which I think is fantastic. And Shadowdark, I was particularly excited to get hold of. I think it's going to be it has been a big hit already, and it's going to be easy to find and entice 5th edition players to give it a try, which is my real goal. I played 5th edition for 2 years. While I did enjoy it, because really any game you play with friends is fun, even if it's bad. I'm not saying the game is bad, but it wasn't up to what I had hoped for, given that 4th edition had sort of slain so many D&D sacred cows, and despite me growing up on those sacred cows, I was quite glad to see some of them go and see them try something different, but everybody decided it was terrible for some reason, and I think they're wrong. And we're seeing a resurgence now of 4E with the MCDM RPG Kickstarter making over 4 million as I film this, which is basically just straight up 4th edition, so with taking 2d6 instead of d20s. So anyway, I'm babbling. We should talk more about the actual game. As you can see, I just went for the basic kind of print package for my pledge. What I tend to do with Kickstarters, if the pitch interests me, if I like, the quick start rules, whatever they post up, I'll decide what I want to get physically, put in my pledge, and then I promptly forget about it. Because if I find that I get really involved in the campaign and make comments and think about it a lot, then I'll get racking my nerves when it's delayed, which it inevitably will be because of one thing or another. But if I just put it out of my mind, then someday it just turns up. and it's like a wonderful Christmas present that I forgot I was going to get. And that's exactly what happened here. I knew it was coming at some point. It's in the back of my mind somewhere, but not anywhere a focus of my attention really. And then just showed up, and I'm so happy that it's here. So we'll take a look first at the extra bits that came with it before we get to the main book. So it comes with these 4 monster cards here. You can see we're in the old school style because the stat blocks, as you can tell, are actually really tiny. Look at that. We've got 3 monsters on 1 card here. So these are different kinds of the classic D&D monster, the gelatinous cube, as you can see here. So this poor fellow is being engulfed. There are some dead skeletons of previous adventurers, perhaps. It's a specialized dungeon predator and kind of iconic of the D&D brand, really. And there's 3 different types here. We've got a heal cube, and you can see you've just got a quick line of stats here. Very easy to understand. You've got your AC, you've got your hit points. All the attacks are listed here, with range, modifiers and so forth, their movement. The Shadowdark system uses range bands and ascending AC. So some of the older games, they used descending AC, where a lower armor class was better. And so you had something called Thaco to hit armor class 0, and you had to do a small amount of subtraction to determine whether you hit something, and people really go nuts about arguing about that. I really don't care either way. I can play both ways. But this has gone with the modern method of everything, rolling higher is always good. And I think that makes sense. These days people like unified mechanics. That's fine by me. And then we have special attacks for each of the various monsters. So here we have a heal cube, which is a massive cube of clear slime with a faint pink color. It has an engulf attack to trap you, and you need to make a DC 12 strength check on your turn to try to escape. But if you're in the cube, you heal 1 HP per round. But you are treated as if you're underwater, so you might drown. So be careful. So also rubbery, so you get half damage from stabbing weapons. The other cubes, they have similar stats and special attacks, but they have different main features. So the magnetic cube is a gray cube, and it's magnetic. So it has engulf and rubbery, just like the heal cube, but this one, DC 12 strength check each round to hold on to large metal objects in near range, or they are engulfed. So that means it can suck the armor and weapons right off of you, or yourself, if you're in your armor, right into the cube, if you're at near range. So it doesn't need to be at touch range, which this one needs to be to engulf you. Then you have the necrotic cube. So this is a green tinted cube with bleached skeleton to drift inside. And this one has 2 additional elements. So it's got engulf and rubbery, but it's also got necrotic. So if you die while engulfed by the necrotic cube, you become a skeleton. And then necrotic cubes have 1d6 skeletons inside them. Each round, 1 escapes to attack the cube's enemies on a d6 roll of 1 to 3. So every round you roll d6. If you get a 1 to 3, a skeleton will pop out of the cube and attack. So it will turn you into an undead monstrosity. And speaking of monstrosities, we have the crabstrosity. So these are massive territorial abominations that were once giant crabs. Eldritch energies emanating from beneath the seafloor warp them into insidious predators. So we have the crabstrosity and the sting barnacle. So it seems like the sting barnacles can kind of attach themselves to the crabstrosity. It's got an AC of 15 and 56 HP, so it's quite a large beastie. It can do a crush attack, so if you make a DC 15 strength check, otherwise you will take 1d10 damage as it crushes you with its giant claws. It can also give you a toxin, so you roll a DC 12 charisma check, or you have a compulsion to protect the crabstrosity for 1d4 rounds, so you'll turn on your party mates as they try to defeat this thing. And then you have the sting barnacles, which only have 1 HP, an AC of 10, and then if you touch one of these with bare flesh, you have to roll a con check or you're paralyzed. And it's got a nice little d20 table of treasure. They tend to accumulate rare and wondrous objects in their guts, apparently. They have 1d6 of some of these items. They include cool stuff like holy symbols, stone basilisk eggs, potions of healing, +1 swords, all that kind of cool stuff. And they have another lovely piece of old school black and white artwork here. We can see the monstrous crab. This guy seems nonplussed, and it seems to be crushing his sword into bits, which is not what you want to see. Then we have Mazim the Mesmerist. What does he look like? He is a evil wizard, I'm gonna guess. That's the vibe I'm getting here. So he's a malevolent sorcerer who has mastered the arcane arts of illusion, hypnotism, and deception. Among his collection of mystical baubles and trinkets is the skull cap of Ord, a bronze helm emblazoned with a radiant eye that amplifies the potency of his spellcasting. So he's revered as an all-wise sage, blah blah blah. He's got AC 10, HP 45. He's got 2 attacks, rolling +6. He has the skull cap of Ord, so 3 times per day he can cast a spell with advantage, so roll 2d20s and pick the best, or choose a spell being cast within far range to have disadvantage. So he can put disadvantage on your spells if you're within far range. And that's another thing about this game is you have to roll for your spells, see if they work. Various outcomes can happen as a result of that. You also got a Crystal of Mind Warping, so if you look into a crystal for 3 consecutive rounds, the wielder can alter one of your memories in a plausible way or implant a new memory that could reasonably be true. So it can really screw with your mind. You can also enchant people at close range, DC 12. The target regards the caster as a good friend for 1d6 rounds, which would put you out of the fight for that period of time. He can create an illusion, a convincing, visible, and auditory illusion up to the size of a sailing ship. So touching the illusion or passing a DC 15 int check reveals its false nature that lasts for 1d6 rounds. And finally, we have Mesmerism, DC 14, near range. All humanoid creatures in range must pass a charisma check versus the last spellcasting check at the start of their turn or stand agape, staring at unseen images. Very cool. Finally, we have the Brain Eaters. Others may know these as the Illithids or the Mind Flayers, but they have been renamed from their D&D origins, I would suppose, perhaps due to the OGL debacle, who knows. So, there's, again, 3 monster entries on the single card here. We have the Alpha Brain, which guides the colony of Brain Eaters in their massive spiral-shaped citadels inside massive caverns deep beneath the earth. So the Alpha Brain is a giant pink brain floating in a pool of green ichor. Brain Eaters and Brain Dogs are born from cysts that grow and break free from it. So it has low AC, but a lot of hit points. It can do a Mind Shred, which is 5d6 damage. And it's telepathic. It can hear the surface thoughts of all creatures within a mile and speak telepathically with up to 4 creatures at a time. DC 15 charisma check to resist its command. So it can even overpower you and make you do it at once. Then we have the Brain Dog, AC 11, HP 15. You can do a bite attack for 1d6 or a stun attack. For the stun attack, one creature in near range will have to do DC 12 int check or paralyze 1d4 rounds. Then we have the real nasties, the Elder Brain Eaters. They have armor class 16, mithril chain armor, 45 HP. They have 4 tentacle attacks at +6, which would do a 1d8 plus latch, or 1 mind blast, or 1 mind control. So they have telepathic, but they can speak within far range with up to 2 creatures at a time, and DC 12 to resist command, so a bit weaker than the Alpha Brain. Tentacles that attack and successfully hit. They will attach to hit targets, automatically hitting the next round. DC 12 strength check on turn to remove 1d4 tentacles. If all 4 tentacles remain latched onto the same humanoid target for 1 round, target's brain is ripped out and devoured. Yes, old D&D was hardcore. You die a lot. Mind Blast fills a near-sized cube extending from the Brain Eater, DC 15, or 3d6 damage and paralyzed for 1d4 rounds. Or it can do Mind Control, so one target in near will have to do a DC 15 charisma check, or the Brain Eater controls them for 1d4 rounds. There you go. So everything is really compactly described. You know, in the style of the old school, the book has a really ample bestiary. All the entries are like this, nice and tight and small. Plenty of room for GM interpretation. They're easy to modify, easy to add on to. And then we also have, of course, the wonderful GM screen. You can see as it unfolds here, we have an adventurer facing some sort of plant-like monstrosity, and then bleeds into this area of kind of overgrown forest, mushrooms. We have our mesmerist friend there, I think. And we then move further along the panel. We have a band of adventurers facing off against this hideous, gigantic spider. So there's a lot of adventure happening. Again, I love the art style of this game. Really captures that old school vibe of the 80s and 90s with this black and white artwork. And inside, of course, you have some key tables. So if you need to roll up some random NPCs, you can do that here. You get age, ancestry, alignment, wealth, and characteristics. Then you can even generate names and occupations. And then there's random encounter tables. So depending on the level of riskiness of the dungeon, it could be unsafe, risky, or deadly. You'll roll for random encounters, either 1 round every 2 rounds or every 3 rounds. And if you get a 1 on the d6, there'll be a random encounter. When you get a random encounter, you'll work out where the random group of enemies will start, how they react to you. So you'll roll 2d6 plus the charisma modification, and they could be hostile, suspicious, neutral, curious, or even friendly. Then what are they doing at the time? They could be hunting, eating, building or nesting, socializing, guarding, or sleeping. There's a random treasure table as well. So you could have a unique feature for the treasure. So you roll a d8 and a d4, and it could be mud caked, or it could be web covered, or an odd material, what have you. Then you can roll for treasure quality. One of the other things about the old school games is that you get XP much more for treasure than you do for killing monsters. So it incentivizes dashing your way through the dungeon, and when you must get into combat, try and stack the odds in your favor as much as possible, because you don't get your XP as much from that activity as you do from just looting the hell out of everybody. Then there's a d20 table of luxury items, which you'll occasionally need to generate for your character. So it's a lovely little GM screen. So here we go. We're zooming zoomed in a bit to get a closer look. The end papers, useful tables. Morkborg also does this. So you have a weapon table here, the cost, type, range, damage, and properties of certain weapons that are key and common. Also for armor, ranging from leather armor to mithril plate. So the cost, number of gear slots it needs, how it affects your AC, and any special properties. Like this one has, if you're wearing chainmail, you get disadvantage on stealth because it jingles around and it weighs you down if you try to swim. If you're in plate mail, you just can't swim and you have disadvantage on stealth. A shield will occupy one hand, all that kind of stuff. Guide for setting difficulty classes from easy at 9 to extreme, which is 18. Morale, again, this is something which has been lost in more modern editions of D&D, so most of the time you get to a fight, enemies will just fight you to the death. That was not the case in the old school. A lot of times you get to a fight, and once the enemy group was reduced by half in size, or if they lost their leader, they would roll a morale check. And that's the same here. So enemies who are reduced to half their number or half their hit points for a solo enemy will flee if they fail a DC 15 wisdom check. If there's a large group, then you make one check using the leader's wisdom modifier. So very much the same idea as the BX days. And then how dying works. So you have a death timer, 1d4 plus con modifier rounds, minimum 1. On your turn, when you're dying, you roll a d20. If you get to 20, you rise with 1 HP. Your homeboys can stabilize you. If they're at close range, they can roll DC 15 int check on success. You stop dying, but you're still unconscious. Then we have distance and movement system. So close range is equivalent to about 5 feet. Near is up to 30 feet. Far is just within your sight range. So again, it's very abstract, made for kind of theater of the mind play. So if you don't want to use, maps and VTTs and all that stuff to play, you don't have to. How climbing works, how falling works, moving through stuff, swimming, spell focuses. If you have a spell you can focus on, then it's kind of like concentration in D&D 5. So you do a spellcasting check at the start of your turn to maintain your spell. If you make a success, then you keep the spell in effect until the start of your next turn. If you fail, the spell ends, but if you were focusing on it, you don't lose the ability to cast that spell. If you're distracted, then you have to do a spellcasting check immediately to maintain focus. So that's like getting hit and stuff like that. The end papers on the other side, we have, again, some useful tables, and this is more for random encounters and the stuff that we see on the GM screen. So again, really handy to have that as part of the end papers. I think that's really useful. So Shadowdark, writing, design, and layout all done by Kelsey Dionne, which is amazing. Tons of art from some really great artists in here. And I have to say the book itself feels really nice. The pages are nice and thick. We've got a stitched binding. Hopefully you can see that there. So really just nicely done in general. Feels really high quality. And we've got a comprehensive table of contents here. So we start out with basics, then we have character generation, we have magic, we have gameplay rules, game mastering hints and tips, then loads and loads of random encounter tables for different types of areas, which is great. Then we have monster stats, then we get into treasure and magic items, and you basically have a complete D&D experience in one book. And throughout, again, you're going to see this beautiful black and white old school style artwork. So introduction. In these nighted halls, doom and glory bloom eternal. This is the story of the Shadowdark. What is Shadowdark? It's a fantasy adventure game where you and your companions delve into buried ruins, lost cities, spider-infested forests, and even fearsome dragon lairs in search of gold and glory. So if you survive, you'll bring back untold riches plucked from the jaws of death itself. So the game is about speed, danger, and in simplicity. It's rules light and intuitive, encourages quick decisions rather than hunting through the rulebook for answers. So it's that kind of rulings over rules approach that D&D 5e claims to have adopted, but in practice, most people go and look for official rulings rather than ruling on the table because the complexity level is just much higher than it was in these kind of older games. And they note, of course, the real-time aspect. So in this game, a torch only holds back the pressing darkness for 1 hour of real-world time. So that's supposed to give the whole game a sense of urgency. So then we have some basic stuff. You have your characters, you describe an action, you can move, how to work out the rounds, type of dice you'll need, which is your standard set of polyhedral die, your stats. So as with any D&D game, we have strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And each stat goes from 3 to 18 and then has a modifier from -4 to +4, depending on how good the stat is. If you want to make a risky action, you roll a d20 and add a modifier, and that's called making a check. So if you wanted to make a strength check or an int check or whatever, you take your modifier that's defined by the value of the check, you roll a d20 and you add or subtract whatever number is your modifier, and you try to beat the difficulty the GM sets for you. They give the example of, DC 9 strength check could be, do you jump over a narrow chasm? It's not too hard, but if you fail, it could kill you, so it's worth rolling the die in that case. Hit points are the way we track injuries, just again, typically like D&D. An average weapon will deal 1d6 damage, and you regain lost HP after a night of rest. Characters 0 HP die in 1d4 plus constitution modifier rounds. Dead characters are retired from play. That's the basic of the game. Really? You don't need a hell of a lot more than that. So to make a Shadowdark character, basically, it's really easy. You have a lot less to deal with character creation than you do in a more modern style game. So you have your name, your ancestry, which is your character's cultural and ancestral heritage. You have your class, which is your job in the adventuring party. Your level, because you can start at 0 or first. You start with 0 experience points, or XP. You gain XP based on the treasure and boons you earn from adventuring. Alignment, Pathfinder 2e has recently eliminated alignment, but it's still here in Shadowdark, and it's a pretty integral part of old school D&D, so I can see why Kelsey's done that. And you can gain titles, so your prestige will grow as you gain levels, and your title will be based on level, class, and alignment. Your background, you can put then your stats, your HP, your armor class, which will depend on the type of armor you can wear and stuff, your attacks, and you can wield the weapons that are listed as available for your class. And you get some special abilities as well. You get some talents. So your class, ancestry, and talent rolls grant you these, and the benefits of talents can combine, even if you have the same talent you roll multiple times. Some classes can learn and cast spells, and then you have your gear. You can carry a number of items equal to 10 or your strength stat, whichever is higher. So it's very simple. So some games will begin with 0 level characters. If you've ever played Dungeon Crawl Classics, you may be familiar with this kind of idea. 0 level characters have what's called beginner's luck here, despite being fragile, so they can wield all gear until first level. They start with stats, ancestry, hit points, background, choice of alignment, and gear, but they don't have a class or any of the other stuff. So the idea of playing in this way is that each player would make like 3 or 4 0 level characters, and you throw them into like a funnel style adventure like DCC, where every player has a bunch of mooks at 0th level, and whoever survives to the end becomes your character. They advance to first level, and then they can choose their class. So that's really a fun way to start a game. You start as like a real 0 and work your way up to hero, and you really feel like it's earned when you get on that first adventure. So most games, they'll begin at first level, and then you get all the stuff that was listed on the previous page. To determine your stats, you just roll 3d6 in order for each one, and then you use the table here to generate your modifier. Optionally, if none of your stats are 14 or higher, you may roll a new set of 6 numbers. So it does give you kind of a mulligan if you have a really bad roll. And again, it reminds you of what each of the stats are good for, which I'm not going to waste time telling you what that means, because I'm sure if you're checking this out, you already know. Ancestry-wise, we have dwarves. So they are brave and stalwart. They know the common and dwarvish language, and they are stout. So they have +2 HP, and they get to roll their hit points every level with advantage. So you roll the die twice and take the better result. If you have an elvish ancestry, you are ethereal, graceful, and revere knowledge and beauty. You see far and live long. You know the common, elvish, and sylvan languages. You also have farsight, get +1 bonus to attack rolls with ranged weapons, or +1 bonus to spellcasting checks. Very handy. If you are a goblin, you know the common and goblin languages. You're green, clever beings who thrive in dark, cramped places. They also have keen senses, so they can't be surprised. Just straight up, can't be surprised, which is pretty awesome. Half-orcs, they're towering, tusked warriors who are as daring as humans and as relentless as orcs. They know common and orcish languages, and they are mighty. +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls with melee weapons. Then we got halflings. They are our hobbit clones. Small, cheerful country folk with mischievous streaks. They enjoy life's simple pleasures. They know the common language only, but they are stealthy, so once per day you can become just straight up invisible for 3 rounds. If you're a human, you know the common language and 1 additional common language, which are on page 32 apparently. You're bold, adaptable, and diverse who learn quickly. And you're ambitious. You gain 1 additional talent roll at first level. So there you go. And now we get into our class descriptions, which are just very simple 2-page spreads. So these are the fighter class. They're blood-soaked gladiators in tinted armor, acrobatic duelists with darting swords, or far-eyed elven archers who carve their legends with steel and grit. They can use all weapons, all armor, and shields. The hit points are 1d8 per level. They have the hauler ability, so you add your constitution modifier to your gear slots. So you have weapon mastery, so you can use 1 type of weapon, like long swords, and you'll gain +1 to attack and damage with that weapon type. In addition, add half your level to these rolls rounded down. So you can really smack some dudes around. You also have grit. Choose strength or dexterity. You have advantages on checks of that type to overcome an opposing force, such as kicking open a stuck door with strength or slipping free of rusty chains with dexterity. And then you have random fighter talent. So at generation time, you get to roll on this table 2d6, and you can gain one of these effects, which means you could gain an additional weapon mastery. You get an extra +1 to melee and range attacks, +2 to strength, dexterity, or con. Choose 1 kind of armor and get +1 AC from it, and choose a talent or +2 points to distribute to stats. So when you level up, your talents are generated randomly, which is cool as well. Then we have the priests. So here, the 2-page spread, we have a priest spells known table here to up to 10th level. So the game maxes out at 10th level. It's not a 1 to 20 like modern D&D. Each level is more of a big deal in this game, in the same way that it would be in classic D&D. So the priests are crusading Templars, prophetic shamans, or mad-eyed zealots who wield the power of their gods to cleanse the unholy. They can use clubs, crossbows, daggers, maces, longswords, staffs, or warhammers. They can use all armor and shields. Their hit points are 1d6 per level. They know celestial, Diabolic, and Primordial languages. And they have the Turn Undead spell, which is really, really handy. As anybody will know, it was a veteran of the old editions. It can allow you to force undead away from you or even kill them. So you can choose a deity who matches your alignment, and you have a holy symbol for your god. You can also cast priest spells. You will know 2 tier 1 spells of your choice from the priest spell list at first level, which you can see here. Each time you gain a level, you choose new priest spells to learn according to the priest spells known table. And there are 5 spell tiers and 10 levels. So you get to level 2, you get 3 spells at first level, so you get 1 more spell. At 3rd level, you can start doing tier 2 spells, and so on and so forth, until at 10th level, you've got a whole bunch of spells at all 5 tiers. Their talents are quite different from the fighter. You get advantage on casting a spell you know, +1 to melee ranged attacks, +1 to pre-spellcasting checks, +2 to strength or wisdom. It seems all of them have the same for a 12, where you can either choose one of the talents or +2 points to distribute to stats. And we got the Thieves. So they are rooftop assassins, grinning con artists, or cloaked cat burglars who can pluck a gem from the claws of a sleeping demon and sell it for twice its worth. They can use clubs, crossbows, daggers, short bows, and short swords. They can only use leather or mithril chainmail armor. They only have 1d4 hit points per level, so they're a bit more fragile. But they can do a backstab. If you hit a creature who's unaware of your attack, you deal an extra weapon die of damage. Pretty cool. Add additional weapon die of damage equal to half your level rounded down. Thievery, so you are trained in the following tasks and have advantage on any associated checks: climbing, sneaking and hiding, applying disguises, finding and disabling traps, and delicate tasks such as picking pockets and opening locks. So obviously in a dungeon, those kind of skills are really useful. Their talents: you can gain advantage on initiative roll, re-roll of duplicate. You can get an additional die of damage on your backstab. You can get +2 to strength, dexterity, or charisma, +1 to melee and ranged attacks, or again choose a talent, or +2 to distribute to stats. Now we got our wizards, the big spellcasters. They are rune-tattooed adepts, bespectacled magi, and flame-conjuring witches who dare to manipulate the fell forces of magic. They can only use daggers or staves as weapons. They can't wear any armor because it interferes with spellcasting. They know 2 additional common languages and 2 rare languages, so they're quite clever. They have hit points of only 1d4 per level like the thieves, so again, quite fragile. You can permanently learn a wizard spell from a spell scroll by studying it for a day and succeeding on a DC 15 intelligence check. Whether you succeed or fail, the spell scroll is used up. Spells you learn in this way don't count towards your known spells, so finding a spell scroll is actually really awesome in this game. Spellcasting, you know 3 tier 1 spells of your choice from the wizard spell list. Each time you gain a level, you choose new wizard spells according to the spells known table. As you can see, you get a bit more than the priests do, and there's more on spellcasting on page 44. Now, your wizard talents, you can make 1 random magic item of a type you choose. You can get +2 to int or +1 to wizard spellcasting checks. You can gain advantage on casting 1 spell you already know. Learn 1 additional spell of any tier that you know, or choose a talent or +2 points to distribute to stats. Now we got our background. So, we've only got a few character classes. And again, this was the way it was back in the day. I mean, these were the main roles that you had in your adventuring party, and you could flavor them any way that you liked. You do that here by rolling up your background. You can also choose one of these if you prefer. You can work with your GM to determine if your background will give you advantage in certain situations. So maybe, if you're a mercenary, you might have advantage on certain combat checks, or if you're a ranger, you'll get advantage on wayfinding in the wild, stuff like that. Alignment, of course, defines where you stand in terms of being chaotic, lawful, neutral. Law is benevolence, chaos is malevolent, neutrality is impartial. Okay, so you just have 3 alignments, not the 9-spot alignment chart of classic D&D. So chaotic characters are the evil ones, aligned with destruction, ambition, and wickedness. Lawful are aligned with fairness, order, and virtue, and operate on a good of the whole mentality. Neutral characters align with the cycle of growth and decline, adopting a nature must take its course mentality. Then we have deities. So these are possible deities depending on your alignment. There's some background lore here, which I won't spoil for you, but we've got some lawful choices, neutral choices, Ord the Unbending, Madeira the Covenant, who is lawful, Memnon the Chaotic God, Shun the Vile, and Lost, ? Okay, so there's lost gods as well, apparently. And then there are titles that you can gain. So depending on your alignment and your class, you can gain a different title as you gain a level. So for example, if you're a level 6 fighter, lawful, you'll become a knight. If you're a chaotic, you'll become a slayer or a battle rager if you're neutral. Likewise, for priest, you can become a templar or a chaos knight or stuff like that. If you're a thief, you can become a cutthroat, an assassin, a boss, a wraith. Wizards go from apprentice to conjurer, channeler, witcher, warlock, mage, sorcerer, druid, whatever. Then we have our different languages and who speaks them. Rare languages are the languages of the angels, demons, devils, dragons, and elder things and elementals, which are celestial, diabolic, draconic, and primordial, essentially. Then we have starting gear and AC. So 0 level characters start with 1d4 of the following items. You just roll in its table. So hopefully you'll get some kind of weapon. on one of those rolls, but you never know. First level characters start with 2d695 gold pieces to just buy gear. Armor class will be 10 plus your dex modifier. Wearing armor will also change your AC, and you can wear the type of armor listed for your class. 0 level PCs can wear all armor until first level, but you're not likely to get a whole lot of cool armor. General gear, we have arrows, so that's your ammo for short bows and long bows, and a pack of 20 will be 1 GP. A backpack holds all the gear that you have. Caltrops you can throw on the ground, and it makes basically creatures that step on the caltrops take damage, and they move at half speed for 10 rounds because they're spikes in their feet. Coins, so 1 gold piece is worth 10 silver pieces or 100 copper pieces. Crossbow bolts. Crowbars gives you advantage on checks to pry open stuck objects. You can get a flasks or bottle, flint and steel for starting fires. Gems, which are just valuable. Grappling hooks, iron spikes, so you can use those to, hammer a door closed or something like that. Lanterns, very important, so they cast light up to a double near distance. They require oil to keep going, and they have a shutter to hide the light if you need to make yourself stealthy. Mirrors, oil flasks, so these fuel a lantern for 1 hour of real time. 1 flask covers a close area and burns for 4 rounds, dealing 1d4 damage each round if you just set the flask on fire. 10-foot long pole, good for poking things, see if there's traps. Rations is 1 day of food and water for 1 person. Rope is made of hemp and 60-foot long. And torches shed light to a near distance and again burn for 1 hour of real time. Talks about the use of gear slots. So a crawling kit is what you would typically need to crawl through a dungeon, handily packaged up for you. So you get your backpack, flint and steel, torch, 2 torches, 3 rations, 10 iron spikes, grappling hook, and a rope. Then you have your armor. So again, you roll up your initial wealth randomly, and then you can use that to buy, leather armor or chainmail or whatever you can afford. Likewise with weapons. So for special properties, they use some abbreviations here. F means finesse. You can use strength or dex modifiers when attacking with this weapon. Loading, L, means that you must forego moving to reload this weapon. So that's things like crossbows, which has an L there. Thrown, you can throw this weapon to make a ranged attack with it. So that includes the dagger. Two-handed, you must use this weapon with 2 hands. That means you can't use a shield at the same time. Versatile means you can use 1 or 2 hands. So for that, you have the great axe and the bastard sword. The higher damage die is to be used only if you're using with 2 hands. So the bastard sword, if you're one-handed, 1d8 damage, two-handed, 1d10 damage. So weapon types, melee range weapons, M, strike at arm's reach, and ranged weapons are strike at a distance. And then you have a range, it could be close, near, or far. Generally, the melee weapons are all close. F is far. There's a few that can do closer, near, like a dagger if you chuck it. Javelin can hit far range, or you can use it like a spear up close. Spears, likewise, you can throw it to near range, or you can poke at close range. And you can see the damage values are all pretty small. Most damaging weapon is the great axe with 1d12, but it's also, d12 is quite swingy, so you never know. Got a random character name generator for different species as well, if you just want to get really quickly into the game and not think too much about your backstory, which is always good for a one-shot. So XP awards are based on the quality of treasure and boons you gain during a session. GM can award XP right away or at the end of each session. So to gain a level, you need to earn your current level times 10 XP. Easy enough, right? Once you reach a new level, your total XP resets back to 0. So when you get to level 2, you'll need 20 XP and you'll reset your level back to 0. You get any new titles, spells, and talent improvements listed for your level. Your maximum HP increases and you might gain a talent roll. So you see you get a talent roll every other level. Duplicate talents will stack unless otherwise noted. For each new level, you roll your class's hit points die and add it to your maximum HP. And then here you can use these tables to randomly generate a 0 or first level character, which is really handy. You can roll ancestry, class, pre-spells, your deity, your language, rare or common, your alignment, your wizard spells at first level, gear, all sorts of stuff. And then we get into magic. We have an angry looking wizard. And here we have the way spellcasters work. So wizard magic is fickle, complicated, and volatile. Priest magic is miraculous, sacred, and instinctive. Priests who offend their gods might lose the ability to cast spells until they undertake penance. So when you cast a spell, you need a spellcasting talent. So you need to be a priest or a wizard. To cast a wizard spell make a spellcasting check by rolling 1d20 plus your intelligence modifier. To cast a priest spell make a spellcasting check by rolling 1d20 plus your wisdom modifier. The DC to successfully cast a spell is 10 plus the tier of the spell. If you succeed, the spell takes effect. If you fail, the spell does not take effect, and you can't cast that spell again until you complete a rest. So if you actually succeed at your spellcasting check, you can keep the spell in your brain. If you fail, you've screwed it up, and it's gone from your memory until you have a rest. If you roll a 20 on your spellcasting check, you may double one of the spell's numerical effects. This remains in effect on a focus spell until your next focus check. If you roll a 1, the spell doesn't take effect. If it was a focus spell, the spell immediately ends. So, if it was a spell that can last potentially more than one round. If the spell was a wizard spell that you critically failed on, you can't cast that spell again until you rest, and you must roll on the wizard mishap table corresponding to the spell's tier. Oh goodness. If it's a priest spell, your deity is greatly displeased displeased and revokes its power, and you can't cast that spell again until you complete ritualistic penance to your deity to successfully complete a rest. So the exact nature of the penance is determined by your GM, requires a holy quest, ritualistic atonement, or material sacrifice that you donate or destroy. Inadequate or subversive penance only displeases your deity further and makes the spell loss permanent. So the sacrifice value should increase quite drastically as the spell tier goes up, so you can see on the table there. So, Wizard Mishaps for Tier 1 to 2. Devastation. Roll twice and combine vocal effects. Refraction. You target yourself with the spell. Or your hand slipped. You target a random ally. Mind Wound. You can't cast the spell again for a week. Harmonic Failure. You lose the ability to cast a random spell until you complete a rest. Poof. You suppress all light within a near distance from you, including sunlight and magical light for 10 rounds. That's real bad. The Horror. You scream uncontrollably for 3 rounds in Primordial, drawing lots of attention. Also bad. Energy Surge. You glow bright purple for 10 rounds, granting enemies advantage on attacks against you. Bad. Unstable Conduit. On a 12, you have disadvantage on casting spells of the same tier for 10 rounds. Higher tier mishaps get correspondingly worse. You can have Devastation again. Blast Radius, so you and all near creatures take 2d6 damage, which could include obviously your party members. Duplicate Refraction, you target yourself and the nearest ally with 2 copies of the spell. 2 pieces of your gear can disappear. You can have random stat drops. You can open sinkholes in the ground that everybody falls into. You can petrify yourself. You can become radioactive, drawing the hostility and attacks of all enemies who can see you for the next 1d4 rounds. Tier 5 has its own table, so you can get 3d8 damage to yourself and all creatures within near. An otherworldly blade cuts into your memory and you permanently forget a random spell. Oof. You accidentally summon a hostile Grimlow in a space near to you. You can get opening a magic portal to another location. Something dreadful will come through unless you close it with a DC 18 intelligence check. You lose the ability to cast all spells of a random tier until you complete a rest. Yeah, you can go Stark Raving Mad. You can have disadvantage on all spells for the next 10 rounds. Or Shred. You tear a large hole in the fabric of the universe close to you. The lightless tear grows larger every round. Oh boy. Then we have Scrolls and Wands. So these contain spells. Spellcasters can use them to cast these spells if the spell's on their spell list, even if they don't know the spell. So to do that, you succeed on a spellcasting check with a DC of 10 plus a tier of the spell. If you fail to cast a spell from Wand or Scroll, it doesn't impact on the ability to cast your known spells. After a spellcasting attempt with a scroll, the magical writing disappears and it ceases to work. If you get a critical failure, then casters with mishap tables must roll a mishap, so you can still get a mishap. Wands, they can store multiple spells. On a failed casting attempt, the wand stops working until you complete a rest. On a critical failure, the wand permanently breaks, and casters with mishap tables must roll a mishap. So this I like a lot, right? In older editions, like 2nd edition, you would have wands that had X number of charges or whatever, and that's carried on till today. With this, you can just kind of keep using it until you have a failed casting attempt, and then you need to rest for it to work again. Or if you critically fail it, the wand just breaks. So nothing really to keep track of. Spell attributes, so they have a tier, 1 to 5, of course, as we know. They have a range, close, near, or far. Self means you can only target yourself. They have a duration. They can be several turns, rounds, or longer. See focus for spells with focus duration. They can have overlapping effects. So ongoing effects of the same spell and same target do not combine. The most powerful effect takes precedence. So some spells last for as long as you focus. So this is the concentration mechanic, which we talked about before. And first we have our pre-spell list. You can see it's a relatively small spell list. Not a lot to remember, but they are quite powerful. The wizard spells, you have a lot more actual spells in comparison, but they come with the risk of mishaps. So there's a bit of a balance there. And the spells are listed, unfortunately, in my view, alphabetically. I kind of wish they were divided up like into divine and arcane and then by tier or something like that. But I understand that for reference, when you have the spell written in your character sheet, finding it alphabetically is pretty easy. So it's not terrible, but you can see the spell descriptions are really nice and tight and easy. It brings me back to 1st and 2nd edition, which I really liked. You didn't have, a million different exceptions for every spell to worry about. It was just like, this is what the spell does, so do it. So for example, Acid Arrow. It has a far range. You can focus, so you can keep casting it. You conjure a corrosive bolt that hits one foe, dealing 1/6 damage around. The bolt remains in the target for as long as you can focus. That's it. Done. Animate Dead, Tier 3, duration 1 day. You touch one humanoid remains and it rises as a zombie or skeleton under your control. The remains must have at least 3 limbs and its head intact. The undead creature acts on your turn. After 1 day, it collapses into dust. All the spells are described in a similar way. They're really easy to understand. They're written in natural language, but it's clear what their limitations are, what their ranges are, and so forth. A lot of these spells will be familiar to longtime players of D&D. Burning Hands, Charm Person, Cloud Kill, all that kind of stuff. Control Water, Confusion, Divination, Dimension Door, which is a teleportation spell, Detecting Thoughts, Curing Wounds, which of course is a wonderful priest spell, Creating Undead, so you can summon a wight or a wraith, Disintegration, target creature of level 5 or less instantly dies, level 6 plus, it takes 3d8 damage instead. A non-magical object up to the size of a large tree will be destroyed. Of course, Dispel Magic is good for wizards, and one spell that affects one target you can see in range. So yeah, there's some pretty useful stuff in here. Classic Fireball. It erupts into a near-sized cube where the flame lands and everybody in that cube takes 46 damage. We got Flame Strikes. You've got Floating Discs that can carry up to 20 gear slots, which is awesome when you need to loot the dungeon. And it's a tier 1 spell, so you can get it right from the beginning. Fly. You can fly for 5 rounds. Tier 5 heal spell from the priest. It's instant, and one creature you touch is healed to full hit points, but you can only do it once, and then you have to rest. Hold monster, hold person, hold portal to keep doors closed, keep monsters or people in place. You can create holy weapons, you can create illusions, you can become invisible. The knock spell for wizards instantly opens any door, window, gate, chest, or portal, defeating all mundane locks and barriers, so it won't work on magic locks. But it also creates a loud knock audible to all within earshot, so it can attract monster attention. Then we got light, very, very important in Shadowdark. So keep that spell handy if you can. Magic Circle. So this allows you to bar creatures of the type that you choose when you cast it. Basically, creatures of that type can't attack or cast a hostile spell on anyone inside the circle. They also can't possess, compel, or beguile anyone inside the circle. We have the classic Magic Missile. A glowing bolt of force deals 1d4 damage to one target, so there's no hit roll. Guaranteed damage, and you have advantage on your check, so it's less likely that you lose this spell. We've got Misty Step, so that's a classic near distance teleport. Pillar of Salt, which is a free spell to turn a creature you target into a statue of hardened salt. Plane Shift, folding space and time to relocate your party to another plane of existence. Polymorph, turn a creature you touch into another natural creature you choose of equal or smaller size. Power Word Kill, one creature you target of level 9 or less dies if it hears you. Treat a failed spellcasting check as a critical failure and roll the mishap with disadvantage. Ooh, that's rough. Very powerful spell with a very bad consequence if you miss. Prismatic Orb. We got Prophecies, protected from energy, protected from evil. So chaotic beings have disadvantage on attack rolls and hostile spellcasting checks against its target, and they also can't possess, compel, or beguile the target. When cast on an already possessed target, the possessing entity makes a charisma check versus the last spellcasting check, and on a failure, the entity is expelled. Very handy. You can rebuke the unholy, which is great for getting rid of the undead, demons, devils, etc. You can regenerate, allowing people to regrow lost body parts as well as gain hit points. Resilient sphere, so nothing can pass through or crush the sphere. Restoration, to get rid of curses and illnesses. Silence, magically mute creatures in the area, and any sounds they create cannot be heard. Handy for stealth. You can shape change. You can send brief mental messages to any creature you're familiar with who's on the same plane of existence as you. Sleep spell, very, very handy, as it always has been. Speaking with the dead, always helpful if you need to learn something about something horrible that happened nearby. Smiting, always good. Stone Skin, helping your wizard become more survivable. Telekinesis is always a good one. You can move a creature in near distance any direction, hold it in place, and then, drop it over a cliff, smash something into it, just hold it there as an easy target. Web, also great. So a near-sized cube of sticky, dense spider web. Any creature stuck in the web can't move and must succeed on a strength check versus your spellcasting check to free itself. Turning undead, as I mentioned before, present your holy symbol if you're a priest, and any undead creatures within near range of you must make a charisma check versus your spellcasting check. If a creature fails by 10 plus points and is equal to or less than your level, it is destroyed. Otherwise, it flees from you for 5 rounds. Wish, the mighty spell that alters reality. Make a single wish stating it as exactly as possible. So they expect the GM to interpret it very, very literally. So be careful with that. Your wish will then occur as interpreted by the GM. Treat a failed spellcasting check for this spell as a critical failure and roll the mishap with disadvantage. So that seems to be the flip side of using the extremely powerful spells. Now we have the gameplay loop. Got another lovely piece of art here. Some people attacking some really hideous centipedal looking things. Is that a word? I don't know. It is now. So, crawlers. So this is all about, how you crawl through the dungeon. They say that one thing you should do is don't confine yourself to what's on your character sheet as far as what you can do. And that's another very old school OSR sensibility. Basically, you don't have to roll a skill check to look underneath something or to listen in a door. They're not on your character sheet, but, you can still do those things. I mean, you are trying to live as your character and assumed to be relatively skilled adventurers even from the beginning. So, some of these clever ideas and your wits are important. So we have advantage, disadvantage. So this is what we know from D&D 5, Call of Cthulhu 7th, and loads of other games. You roll 2 die and pick the better result. If you have both advantage and disadvantage on a roll, they cancel each other out. You can have a natural 20, so if you roll a 20 without any modifiers, it's automatically a hit and gets a critical hit. A natural 1 automatically misses and might even strike an ally. And then there's a D6 decider. If there's a random outcome, such as whether a drop torch goes out, the GM calls for a D6. A 1 to 3 results in the worst outcome, and a 4 to 6 6 results in the better one. Sometimes the GM can award you a luck token as well, so big sacrifices, moving speeches, daring maneuvers, etc. Each player can only have 1 luck token at a time, and you cash it in to re-roll any roll you just made, but you must use the new result. You can also give your luck token to a companion if you wish. The GM might award 2 to 3 new luck tokens per player during the course of a session with a pulpy heroic feel. Alternatively, the GM might not give out any new luck tokens during a game session that is grim, difficult, and dark. And now there are some tips on using your different stats and when you should roll. So usually you succeed at what you're trained to do without needing to roll a check. So for example, if you're a wizard, you can read magical runes. A thief will always find a trap if they're looking around in the right spot. If you take the time to scan the sky for threats or examine the wall for a secret door, you'll simply find it. Social encounters rely on what you say instead of charisma checks, but the GM will ask for a check when the action could have a negative consequence or failure. The action requires skill, and there's time pressure. So for a lot of things, you'll role play them out to decide if they succeed or not. You have to convince the GM by being convincing. I would say, however, that some people are not so good at that, coming up with spur of the moment, rousing speeches or whatever. So in those cases, there's nothing wrong with allowing people to say, look, my character is not me. They're more charismatic than me. So I want to roll for this instead of having to speak to you about it. I certainly would allow that. Some people are just more socially inclined than others, and that shouldn't be holding you back at the table. A contestant check, you both roll same check at the same time, and the highest result wins, and you re-roll ties. Time passing in the game, you typically would use real time in Shadowdark, and it matters most for tracking light sources because each light source only lasts for 1 hour of real time. But if you don't want to track real time, or if it's too limiting, you can assume 1 hour is equal to 10 rounds. A turn is a player's moment to describe what their character does to the GM. A round completes when each person has taken 1 turn. Every moment in the game doesn't have to be accounted for in real time, so if the characters want to spend 10 minutes examining a room from top to bottom, the GM and players can agree that time just passes, and the GM will tell you what you find. So effects with the duration of rounds expire after a certain number of minutes. The GM will roll 1 random encounter check that occurs on a 1 to 3 on a 6 while this time is passing. If you're looking for hours or days to pass, then you use the overland travel rules to check for encounters that occur. Then we have turn order. At the beginning of the game, basically right from moment 1, you establish initiative, or the order in which the players act. Everyone rolls a d20 and adds their dex. The GM adds the highest dex modifier for any monsters if relevant. If you're in freeform mode, you don't need to be strict. You might just do a sort of round robin around the table. Once everyone is done, then you're done with your turn. So in player turn, you count down any personal timers for spells and other effects. You take an action and move up to near, split up in any way you choose, so you can move, shoot, then move again, etc. If you're skipping an action, you can move near distance twice, and then the GM describes what happens. The GM turn happens, and they count down any timers not tracked by players. They check for random encounters if need be. They take action to make movements for any relevant creatures or environment effects, and they describe what the characters notice as a result of all of those steps. So when you're crawling a dungeon, you have crawling rounds while you're not in combat. So they are exploring, talking, and engaging with the environment. So you need light to see, generally speaking, and light sources last for an hour of real time. If you're in total darkness, any creature who is not darkness adapted at disadvantage on tasks it undertakes that require sight, and the environment becomes deadly, which means you could get a random encounter every crawling round. So during a crawling round, your distances are divided up into close, near, and far. Again, you can do climbing, falling, you can move through allies freely, you can swim, you can also regroup. Some conditions will impose problems on you, like blindness or immobility. While crawling, you can take actions that are not combat related, like prying a gem from a statue, sneaking up on a slumbering beast, looking for a hidden door, etc. An encounter occurs when any challenge presents itself that stops the character's progress. Injured characters that are out of combat, you can recover from wounds. So to rest, you consume a ration and sleep for 8 hours. Sleep can be broken up for light and routine tasks, such as taking a turn on the watch. If you successfully rest, you regain all lost hit points and recover all stat damage. All stat damage is temporary unless described otherwise. Additionally, some talent, spells, or items regain their ability to be used after a full rest. So characters can rest anywhere, but doing so in a dungeon has a high chance of failure. If you're in an unsafe environment, the GM will check for random encounters every 3 hours. If the dungeon is unsafe, if it's risky, check every 2 hours. If it's deadly, check every hour. So that's when you're in darkness, etc. You can also combine 3 torches into a campfire that can't be moved. Campfire lasts up to 8 hours and casts light out to a near distance. That'll keep you out of deadliness of darkness. Hiding and sneaking. You succeed on dexterity checks to go undetected by other creatures within eyeshot or earshot. Creatures can't hide while other creatures are able to see them, and it might also be impossible to hide if there's nowhere for a creature to stay out of sight. If you're looking in the right place, you'll automatically see a hidden creature. Otherwise, you must succeed on a wisdom check to perceive a sneaking or hiding creature. If you manage to not detect something or somebody doesn't detect you, you get the advantage of surprise. So you take one turn before the combat initiative roll, and a creature will have advantage on attack rolls against surprise targets. Attacking from hiding gives away the attacker's position afterwards unless the GM determines otherwise. And then we have our combat. So now we have all the ingredients basically to understand how that works. You determine surprise. Anybody that has a surprise round will take it. Then you do your combat initiative, which is a d20 plus your dex modifier. The highest result goes first, and then turns go clockwise from that person. During your combat turn, you can take an action and move, or you can move twice. For your attacks, you can do a melee attack, a range attack, or you can cast a spell. You could do an improvised action, so that might require like a stat check or an attack roll, depending on what you want to do. You could do multiple small things like standing up, speaking, activating an item, or quaffing a potion. Then when you hit something with an attack or a spell, you damage it. You roll your weapon or spell's damage dice plus any relevant bonuses, and that will then be subtracted from the target's hit points. You will deal a critical hit on a natural 20, so for a weapon, you double the damage dice. For a spell, you double one of its numerical effects. If you are attacking a creature that has at least half its body behind terrain, you have disadvantage. If you can't see a creature at all, you can't target it. Your creatures can only move half the normal distance through difficult terrain like ice or deep mud. Then we have the morale checks I mentioned before. We have the death timer, stabilization, and death that we've talked about as well. Then we have overland travels. This is outside of the crawling environment. So we have random encounters using the same cadence that we do during resting. If needed, you can determine how much light you need, but there's rarely total darkness outside because you have moonlight and sunlight and stuff like that. PCs can travel up to 8 hours per day and pass increasing contracts to push further. A hex, if you're doing a hex crawl type campaign, are 6 miles across, and talks about the time it takes to cross a hex, depending on the method, walking, mounted, sailing, etc. PCs in unfamiliar territory must have their navigator make an int check upon exiting a hex. On a failure, the group moves into a random adjacent hex, so you can get lost. That can be handy if you can negotiate with the GM that you have background in being a ranger, for example, that helps you navigate. You can go 3 days without consuming a ration, but then you take 1 constitution damage each day after that, and you die if your con reaches 0. You can forage for 1 ration per day using an intelligence check. So between adventures, you can do carousing, so you convert the coin you've earned into XP and other benefits. So you can do gambling and stuff. You can also learn a new skill. Work with the GM what you can try to learn, then make an extreme intelligence check. If you succeed, you learn the new skill. If you fail, you can try again as your next downtime activity, this time lowering the difficulty by 1 step. So then you have your carousing table. So to carouse, each participant pitches in for the cost of the event, which is listed here. Then each participant rolls 1d8 plus the event's bonus, listed here, to generate their own outcome. And the outcomes are generated here. So if you pump in 1800 GP, you get 2 legendary weeks of drinking and debauchery, you get plus 6 bonus. Then you roll a d8. So the higher up the table you go, the more XP you gain, and the more possibility of getting a item from one of the treasure tables, which is pretty awesome. Then you have the Wizards and Thieves gambling game, which I'm not going to go into. Yeah, you can play gambling games and get stakes. You can play for coppers, bragging rights, middle stakes. You can play for personal trophies or gold. Play for jewelry, a finger, irreplaceable items, or epic stakes like your life, rarest drink in the world, or diamonds. Yeah, so there you go. And then we have a lovely example of play, which shows, how all the various bits of crawling work, spellcasting. It's nice and extended as well, so you get a little bit of examples of everything. Then we got the GM section. The one rule is that you make the rules. So what's in the book, if you think it doesn't work for you for some reason, you can change it. You could eliminate the rule or do whatever you want. You ultimately have the power to decide how your table runs. The pact that you should have with your players, so you and your players are getting together to have fun, prop each other up, and strengthen bonds. You should have goodwill, respect, and fellowship. You don't want selfishness, antagonism, and arrogance. So basically, you don't want players to be selfish. You don't want players to, try and spark fights with other players in the party. And for the players, you want them to be hooked into an adventure. A call to adventure. So that could be perhaps an award. They want treasure and XP to make their characters better. They might want to be a hero, right, wrong, save the day, or make a name for their characters. So it's a role-playing kind of goal. You might want to solve a mystery, like why there's a problem or why a location exists and what secret it hides. The core ethos of the game, time is the key, and respecting the darkness. So few things can hold it back, and basically torches and lamps are your best friends. Gear is precious and limited, so it should be really important to the game. Action economy counts. Basically, you get 1 action per turn, so it should count. And you dispense information freely, so don't hide things, gate clues behind checks, and so forth. There's no like precise measurement, you just sort of rough it out with the ranges. Everything is danger, so casting spells have risks, magic items are volatile, fights are fast and unfair, and monsters are insidious. And when characters invest things, they should get rewarded for that. So if a character learns a new language, make a difference in the next campaign. Allow titles or deeds to have an impact on the characters' lives. Characters succeed at what they are trained to do, only use stat checks when there's time pressure, and failure has dire consequences. You should also be unpredictable so that your players never quite know what's coming, but do telegraph danger. They're getting close to a big badass monster. You might say that they can smell the reek of corpses, rotting matter, and stuff like that. And they talk about the basics of a standard campaign. So you'll have your adventures tied together into larger campaigns. You will need non-player characters as sources of quest, treasure, danger, and motivation, but you can roll those up randomly. They don't have to be like full legendary NPCs or whatever. And sometimes you'll need to deal with mundane stuff like basic gear, wealth, and the danger of, getting robbed on the road. All that kind of stuff should always be a problem. There's some tips on setting DCs, setting different kinds of challenges. Character skill and player skill are two different things. So players will start to look for secret doors by learning how you build dungeons and how dungeons are built in general, and encourage this by letting players make decisions that rely on their creativity, not just on their stat bonuses. And again, rules versus rulings, a very OSR trait. Shadowdark encourages you to be a neutral arbiter of the rules. So, you have built-in sort of limiters on the game that push the players to take risks. You have random encounters, which are not always hostile, but, they could be. You have light timers, so you're going to run into the darkness eventually. You need to manage your resources. You need torches, but you also need treasure. And you'll be tempted to grab more treasure and thus get more XP. Character death is part of the risk and tension as well. Gives you some advice on setting the tone, what kind of characters you want to have a session 0 to establish how the characters know each other, role play any sort of precursor scenes, and you can start small. You just need a starting location, some NPCs, and a short adventure. And then there's some cool stuff here about attacking the light. So this is a key aspect of the game. So, the main source of time pressure is that you've only got so many sources of light and they are limited duration. There are various ways to attack them. You could imperil torches and lanterns via random encounters. You could have enemies try to extinguish them. You could have opposing spellcasters hit the target of light spells with dispel magic to neutralize it. You'd have the environment be a risk, gusts of wind, dead magic zones, thin air, explosive gas, all kinds of stuff. And dropping a torch or lantern might extinguish it or break it on a 50-50 chance on D6. You'd also have light mishaps, so there's some rolls if you want to do it randomly. There are different modes of play as well. So Blitz mode, light timers are only 30 minutes. Chaos mode, reroll initiative at the start of every combat round. Deadly mode, death timers are always 1 and DC 18, intelligence and stabilized dying. Fatality mode, characters die straight up at 0 hit points. Grinder mode, with each successful rest, you only regain 1 stat damage per stat and an HP equal to 1 roll of your hit die. Spellcaster choose 1d4 lost spells to regain after a successful rest. Hunter mode, defeated monsters grant XP equal to half their level. It's very helpful. And that could make the game more modern in feel if you want to do that instead of using treasure and the various different ways of earning XP from that. Momentum mode, you have advantage on checks to repeat an action you failed if you try the exact same action on the next turn. And damage dice explodes. If you roll max damage, roll again and add it to the total and keep on doing so if you get more max damage. There's no cap. Pulp mode, there's no maximum luck tokens you can have. You start every session with 1d4 of them. You can use a luck token to turn a hit into a critical. You can use a luck token to take an extra action, or you can use a luck token to force the GM to re-roll as well. Then there's some advice on random encounters. So again, we saw that on the GM screen. It's all very intuitive. The reaction check is important and something that will be new to players of newer editions of D&D, because in, 3rd edition onward, basically, if you saw a monster, you basically assume they're going to try and kill you. But that's not always the case in the Shadowdark. It's a deadly realm. Creatures are trying to survive as well. So they may be hostile if they think that you're going to take their stuff or that you will take their resources, but they might just be suspicious and not immediately hostile. They could be neutral, just sort of hoping you'll pass by without incident. Might be curious and approach you to perhaps to parlay. They might even be friendly. There's also a 50% chance that a randomly encountered creature has no treasure. So random encounters are there to continually wear down your resources and your light. You will get some bonuses from them, in terms of treasure, but not always. You also have traps as well. So traps need to make sure that there's some kind of hint or tell. Don't use too many or the characters will feel frustrated and slowed down. Characters who search a specific area for a trap will automatically find it. And thieves can automatically disable a circumvent a trap if they know where it is. If there's time pressure or there's a huge amount of complexity to the trap, the GM might call for a stat check. And there's some examples of different types of traps. Hazards, so these are passive dangers in the environment, things like quicksand, acids, pools, lava, steam vents, cold, terrible smells, etc. So some can prevent movement, some can weaken you, some can cause damage, and some can combine multiple things. Then we have the gauntlet. So this is the kind of the funnel approach that I was talking about, like from Dungeon Crawl Classics. So this is where you start with 4 0-level characters each, toss them into a dungeon, and whoever survives makes it to level 1. Awarding XP. So XP rewards don't need to reflect monetary value. So there's 4 categories of treasure: poor, normal, fabulous, and legendary, ranging from 0 to 10 XP, and summarized handily in a table here. Sources of XP include gold and gems, oaths, secrets, and blessings, magic items, meaningful trophies or tokens, and clever thinking. You'll get 1 XP for ingenious actions. Over time, you'll earn and lose gold through adventuring, carousing, and buying gear. Per treasure find, each group should gain about 10 GP times their average party level in value. So that's really handy. You know, when you're a GM needs to give out some treasure, how much do you do? Here's a table you can roll if you need something to happen, just to spice things up. A seagull lands on your head and coughs up an odd bottle. A mound of the earth quickly burrows towards you. You sense you're being magically scryed upon. A multicolored orb drifts up to you and then zips away. So you can just have cool stuff happening at random. You can have random rumors that NPCs might give out about nearby adventure seeds, which is always handy. We can have adventure generators as well. This is really good. You roll a d20 3 times and you get your adventure detail. So it could be deliver the demon in the city sewers, pacify the werewolf in the Mirkwood, all this kind of stuff. And immediately you have an idea what the adventure could be about. I mean, it's great for sparking inspiration. Then you can create an adventuring site name. So it could be the Abbey of the Bleeding King or the Barrow of the Dead God, all this kind of stuff. Then you can randomly generate NPCs, their qualities, their occupations. You can also generate rival crawling parties. This is another thing that we used to have a lot in old school D&D that doesn't happen much anymore. You would occasionally run into other adventurers in the dungeon trying to do the same thing as you, i.e. get gold, get glory. So you can generate random parties of rival Shadowdark crawlers. They'll have 1d4 plus 1 members of the same alignment, and you roll 1d6 to determine each rival crawler's starting level. Then you determine their ancestries, classes, alignments, renown. You might have a secret, or they will have a secret, which you can then maybe use against them. They'll have a certain amount of wealth, so if you kill them, you might get some boons from that. They'll have a name for themselves. They could be the Mighty Dawn, the Emerald Wardens, the Divine Sentinels, whatever. And they'll have signature tactics depending on their alignment and the d4 roll. So they might, always negotiate, fight honorably, don't use stealth. If they're chaotic, they'll ambush you, kill everything, and target the helpless. We got NPC name generators, identifiers. You can even generate maps. So roll or choose a site size and type. Use a set of paper and note the position where each die fell. Draw an outline around it. Then separate the rooms with walls and passages that match the dungeon type. Roll the number on each die to determine the type of room it is. Site's objective or boss monster is located in the room with the highest room type roll. There you go, boss monster is a 10. So you can just generate monsters and treasure and NPCs and hazards and stuff completely randomly. Same with overland hex maps. You can generate points of interest, settlements, villages, towns to cities. You can have different danger levels and hex terrain. You can have cataclysms happening. You can have new hexes. You can generate settlement maps randomly, so it could be a different type of settlement. So you roll different numbers of dice, and you'll, again, sort of chuck your dice onto a sheet and draw districts around them. Those districts will have different properties. Each of those different properties has, points of interest, which you'll roll on a d6. You can generate random taverns. So poor taverns, you have only 2 drinks and the food is poor. Standard taverns, you can get 3 drinks and the food is 1 poor plus 2 standard. Wealthy taverns, you have 2 standard plus 2 wealthy and 4 drinks. And you can roll types of drinks and food on the tables as well. Shops, different types of shops will have different items available and you can generate different names for them. You can generate interesting customers, which might catch the interest of your players. So loads of great random generation stuff in here, which is a real feature of the OSR approach. And now we have our encounter tables, which go by terrain type, and district types, castle districts, the Arctic, caves, deep tunnels. What else we got? Deserts, forests, grasslands, high districts, jungles, and these are D100 tables, so you got quite a lot of variety here. Low districts, markets, mountains, oceans, river and coasts, ruins, slums, swamps, taverns, temple districts, tombs, university districts, and there's our beholder from the cover. Now we have the monster listings. I won't spoil these too much, but they outline their basic attributes. They have an AC, armor class, and hit points. So you calculate a monster hit point by rolling a number of d8s per monster level and adding his con modifier, or just use the average total listed. Most monsters can make 1 or 2 attacks per turn, but some can make more. Attack bonuses and damage are listed for each. Also list their movement under MV, stat modifiers for strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, their alignment. You might have spellcasting, so basically it works the same as for PCs. All non-humanoid monsters are dark adapted, so they ignore the penalties of total darkness. Blinding or deafening a monster, though, will still hinder it. You can also have monster generators. So you can also make monsters weird with mutations, just to keep things interesting. They never know quite what to expect. Every monster could be slightly different, which is awesome. There's tips on designing monsters for different levels, different stat modifiers and combat roles, and how many monsters should face off against a typical party. The average party level is 0 to 3. You want a monster level of 1 per party member. You know, if you have average level 4 to 6, you want monster levels of 3, and etc. And then we have our monster stats. Loads of them. Got aboleths, angels, acolytes, various types, animated armor, snow apes, assassins, bandits, badgers, basilisks, giant bats, black puddings, bugbears, boulettes. A lot of these will be names you recognize from D&D probably. Chimeras, trolls, cloakers, cockatrices, giant crabs, cultists, deep ones, dark mantles. They have the darkness power to extinguish all light sources in near range. Terrible. Demons. They can use hellfire. They're immune to fire. And there's all different types of demons as well. Carrying mist. If you fail a 15 con check, you'll have violent vomiting for 1d4 rounds. Then we have devils as well. For the Crown of Darkness. All hostile spells are reflected at caster with a spell casting check less than 20. That's pretty bad. Yeah, I mean, you can see the monsters' stat blocks are tiny, but a lot of them have a special something. So Triceratops can charge you, Pterodactyls can grab you, Velociraptors are clever, Genies can give you wishes, they're only damaged by magic weapons, they can transform into a whirlwind. Dragons, of course, are really deadly. Different types of dragons include desert, fire, forest, sea, frost, swamp, etc. They have particular abilities, so a fire dragon is fire immune and has fire breath for 60-10 damage. Desert dragons have lightning breath, and they can cast Mirage to create duplicates of themselves, magical duplicates. Forest dragons have poison breath and animate plants. Sea dragons, steam breath, and water spout spells. Frost dragons have frost blood, so they're cold immune. And they have ice breath, so they do 48 damage and you're frozen for a round. Swamp dragons have smog breath, which can blind you as well as doing damage. Then we have the drow, the underground dark elves. Driders are a classic from back in the day, which were half drow, half spider. They can poison you as well, which paralyzes you. Dryads, Duergar, Ifrits, various elementals, elves, elephants, fairies, ettercaps, gargoyles, ghosts. So these are tough. We've got ghosts is great or undead, so they're immune to morale checks, which is what makes undead scary. They don't worry about morale. Same with ghasts, for example, and ghouls. Ghosts are incorporeal, so they can choose to become corporeal or incorporeal instead of attacking. If they touch you, they will deal 1d4 con damage. So it damages your constitution and will reduce your con modifier as a result. If they are corporeal, they can target you at close range, do a contested charisma check, and if they win, they inhabit your body and control it for 2d4 rounds, which is obviously a real pain if they possess your big beefy fighter or your clever spellcaster with lots of fireballs. Ghasts are also undead. They have a stench, which puts disadvantage on attacks and spellcasting first time you get near them, or they can paralyze you. Ghouls can paralyze you. Then we got different types of giants, which will have different types of special abilities. So stone giants, for example, get half damage from stabbing and cutting weapons. Storm giants can cast lightning bolt for 5d10 damage, which is loads. Got gibbering mouthers, goblins of various types, including shamans that have some spells and stink bombs. Various types of golems, again with different special effects. Clay golem can curse you. Iron golems can poison you. Flesh golems go berserk. Stone golems are slow, but they're immune to loads of damage. Gorgons can petrify you. Grey ooze can dissolve metal, which is always nasty. Griffins, grimlows, which you could summon accidentally through a spell. Tall, oval-shaped mammal. A giant half-moon maw hides on its belly beneath its gray fur. So they can grab you in their tongue and pull them into your mouths. Bite attacks then automatically hit. And you need DC 15 strength check to break free. Various types of hags. Classic to mythology. Hellhounds, hippogriffs, hippopotami, horses, hydras, invisible stalkers, Jellyfishes, knights, various kobolds, krakens. They got 4 giant tentacle attacks. They can cast lightning bolts. They can crush you. They can create a storm in the sea and capsize your vessel on a 1-6 chance. Not great. Got the Lich. So they're a classic greater undead, actually supreme undead. So they're immune to morale checks and only damaged by magic. They can't be killed while their phylactery, a spirit vessel, is active. They can paralyze you, they can fly. Hostile spells targeting them are DC 18 to cast. They can do shadow leap and teleport up to 100 miles away. Sigil of Doom, one target of level 9 or less within near DC 15 con or go immediately to 0 HP. They can also do Wither, 48 damage to enemies within the near side. It's cube, centered on the Lich. You've got enemy mages. They can blast you, can cancel your spells, levitate, or ensnare you. Lizard folk, manticore, medusas, minotaurs, the mimic. These are always terrible. They are, the guys in Dark Souls that look like treasure chests. That's from D&D. DC 15 strength check, or they will adhere to the target. Auto hit with their bite, which does 1d8 damage. And at DC 15 strength check to remove. Then we got some named monsters as well. Mordenticus the Flayed, so he can be a main boss. We got mummies, another supreme undead. So they take times 2 damage from fire, but they have necrosis. If they use that on you, you drop immediately to 0 HP. Healing spells are DC 15 to cast on target due to this effect. So they're rotting away, basically. We got Nagas, Nightmares, another named super boss. Got ochre jellies. So if you cut them, they split into 2 smaller oozes and can split up to 4 times. That's not great. Got an Oni. I love that. Japanese folklore coming into play here. They can shapeshift. They can fade out of existence into invisibility. They can use Hellfrost, or they can turn into mist that can fly double near distance. Got Orc Chieftains, Octyugs, Primordial Slimes, Void Spiders, horse-sized arachnids that are impervious to cold and become incorporeal once per round. And they can poison you, which just straight up drops you to 0 in 1d4 rounds. So they're toughies. We've got owlbears, which can crush you. If they hit you with both claws, they deal an extra die of damage. Phoenixes, priests, which will have rebuke, holy flame, healing touch, and anoint spells. Purple worms, which are massive and 18 AC, and they can swallow you whole. Total darkness inside and 2d10 damage per round is done to you. The worm regurgitates everything it swallowed if dealt at least 20 damage in 1 round to the inside of its gullet. So you really need to be high level to escape from a worm's gut. We've got rot rats, dire rats, giant rats, swarm of rats, Wrathgamnon, I guess must be this guy. And I'm not going to spoil the big monsters because that would be very lame of me to do so. We've got Sahuagin, humanoids with sea green skin. We've got rocks, giant birds, ropers that look like cave rocks and basically difficult to see. We've got scorpions, giant scorpions, shadows, so they do strength damage, and at 0 strength you will die and become a shadow yourself. Not very good. You got Megalodon sharks, which are fearless. Skeletons, pretty simplistic, but they are immune to morale checks. Always scary. We've got some cool snakes, including giant snakes, which can constrict. We've got sphinxes. They have quite a lot of abilities. They can paralyze you with their roar. They can open portals to another location. They can use omens to get advantage on all actions for 1d4 rounds. They can pose a riddle, and if you don't pass an int check, you are stupefied. They can bend time, freezing somebody near to them in time for 1d4 rounds. Or they can do unmake, 3d8 damage to 1 target. Got spiders, giant spiders, swarm spiders, stingbats, another, the 10-eyed oracle. That's a beholder, basically. So they've got eye stalk rays. Each ray can shoot once per round to target 1 creature or an object up to 1,000 pounds. And those rays have charm, hold, sleep, polymorph, cancel, confusion, telekinesis, disintegrate, petrify, and death. As with other beholders, our usual beholders, they are terrifying. Same with the legendary Tarrasque. There is only one, and it is the most dreaded creature to walk the earth. AC 22, HP 140, 4 thrash attacks at plus 13, 3d10 plus sever. So on a natural attack roll of 18 plus, the attack severs a random limb. On a 1, it's your head. On a 2 to 4, it's an arm. On a 5 to 6, it's a leg. They can also swallow you whole, 4d10 damage per round while you're inside, and you need to deal 30 damage in 1 round to get out. They can rampage, move far in a straight line and make 1 bite with triple damage. They have a reflective carapace that's immune to rays, blasts, or bolts of energy. With a 1 in 6 chance, these are reflected right straight back at whoever shot them. They regenerate 4d10 lost HP at the beginning of their turn. They're immune to harm from fire and cold, and amphibious. They can only be damaged by magical sources, and hostile spells targeting them are DC 18 to cast. They can burrow, and they can swim, and they can move triple near, and their bite does 5d10 damage, plus sever, plus swallow. So, terrifying. Then we have some more bosses. We've got thieves, thugs, treants, trolls. Frost trolls, vampires, vampire spawn, unicorns, violet fungus, viperians. So these are the fallen civilization of serpent folk, basically. Get a little bit of Lovecraft in there. Got wights, they're greater undead, and they can do life drain, which is con damage. Got wolves, dire wolves, winter wolves that have frost breath. Pretty cool. Wraiths, greater undead, only damaged by silver or magic. They can become corporeal, incorporeal, and they also have life drain. Zombies. So if they're reduced to 0 HP by a non-magical source, they can roll a con check and go to 1 HP instead, so they're really hard to kill. Then we got treasure. So we've got treasure overviews. If you're carousing, you can gain XP fast, but you'll need to go adventuring again to replenish your pockets. Treasure tables are here to randomly determine what loot a monster has. And the treasure table the monster uses corresponds to its level. You can also generate unguarded treasure. Treasure typically occupies 1 gear slot. Coins occupy 1 slot per 100. Magical items can rarely be bought or sold. In such case, weak magic items are worth 1d6 times 100. Powerful ones, if not priceless, are worth 2d6 times 100. Generally, you want to keep them. So here we have a treasure table for levels 0 to 3 and 4 to 6. Start getting, more and more cool stuff, expensive stuff, and useful things like potions of giant strength, treasure 7 to 9, and treasure 10 plus. And we've got mundane items, and these can be things like gemstones. They'll have a unique feature, which could be good or bad. Luxury items, they could be made of different materials. And we've got boons, so these are non-monetary sources of value. So you might have an oath. This would be a favor owed to you by a unicorn, a title granted by a baron, or the promise of safe harbor by a dryad, something like that. You can get blessings, which are enchantments. They can be temporary or permanent, and they give you XP, which is cool. Secrets and blessings and oaths can all give you XP based on its utility. Magical items and how they work, so you can generate them randomly as well. A few magical items have personalities that include virtues, flaws, a trait, and alignment. They communicate telepathically with their users. That goes back to the old days, so in the early days of D&D, basically it was sort of assumed that magic swords were often intelligent and had a personality. You would get swords that would talk to you. It really doesn't happen anymore as much, or at least not nearly as much as it used to, but I thought that was really cool back in the D&D days. You can randomly generate some cool armor, magical armor, could have benefits or curses. You can generate different potions and the effect that happens when you mix them. You could have a potion benefit, or you could have cursed potions. You can have scrolls and wands, and they can have curses and benefits, which you roll from the other tables. They can give you a spell of a given tier, and then you would roll randomly for which spell and which tier they hold. Utility items, they'd be, things that you would basically give you some kind of benefit, some kind of curse, but they're not for combat or for casting spells. You can find magical weapons. They give you bonuses to attack and damage. They'll have a special feature, and they could have a benefit and or a curse. And they could be of any and all different types of weapons. Item personality. So if a conscious item has a personality, it might warn you against certain things. It'll have a calming presence, certain type of animals. It might be owed a favor by some kind of creature. It has legit prophecies but isn't sure of their meaning. It could have an alignment that's different from yours. It could have a flaw, like it doesn't like to be used for certain things, in which case you have to beat it on a contested charisma check to insist that it be used that way. And then there's some tips on designing magic items, including game breakers. So basically use extreme caution on effects that obviate the need for torches or the light spell. It's a key part of Shadowdark, so you don't want to eliminate the light economy from the game. Similarly, giving extra gear slots is potentially game breaking because that's a major source of pressure for surviving, getting into and out of the dungeon, and for repeated visits to adventure sites, right? You need to come out because you run out of gear slots. And then we have some magic items. Some of these are classics: the Bag of Holding, Bag of Devouring, Bead of Force, hitting the target in a resilient sphere, Boots of Dancing, basically they're cursed items that make you dance uncontrollably, Brace of Defense, Boots of Hovering, Boots of the Cat, so you can jump from a standstill and you can always get easy checks for moving silently. Cloak of the Bat to give you some flying abilities, but you have a curse, and occasionally you turn into a small bat for 3 rounds. Now, crystal balls to do scrying. You can have the egg of the cockatrice. That'll allow the egg to hatch and give you a cockatrice command for 5 rounds before flying away. The egg repairs itself then over 1 week. It's pretty cool. Flying carpets, goblin bombs, genie lamps, helm of mind reading. You can cast a detect thought spell 3 times per day. Cool. Hat of Intellect gives you an intellect stat of 18 with a +4 bonus while you wear this hat. That's awesome. Longbow of the Elven Kings, +1 longbow. Advantage on attacks with this bow against unnatural creatures and outsiders. Alright. Magic ink, so can only be seen when warmed up by a source of strong heat. Mirror of Mischief. So when you look into this mirror, the mirror creates an evil and malicious duplicate of them. That's cool. Entropic armor. Once per day, you can speak the armor's command word, and until the next turn, all non-magical items that strike you are instantly unmade, shattering into dust, and you take no damage. Wow, that's pretty cool. Only once per day, but that is awesome for a boss fight. Necrotic Maces of Withering, Night Cloak Armor, so you can automatically pass checks to hide. Ophidian Armor, you have advantage on checks to avoid poison. Portable Hole, that's a classic. If you place this inside a bag of holding or another portable hole, you destroy both items and all held inside them. Portable Hole gives you 20 slots of gear storage, and it closes when you fold the cloth into a small square. Potion of Giant Strength gives you 18 strength and times 2 damage on melee attack for 10 rounds. You can get flying potions, healing potions at different levels, vitality potions, which can permanently grant you HP. But if you could drink more than one in your lifetime, you have to pass a DC 18 Constitution check or die instantly. You can use polymorph potions, feather fall, that's always handy. Ring of Fireballs, Ring of Invisibility, Robe of the Sorcerer, Robe of the Archmage. You can only wear it if you have the Archmage title. Your unarmored AC becomes 15 plus your dex. Choose 3 spells you know. Their spellcasting DC is always 11. You have advantage on casting Disintegrate spell. Cool. Scarabs of Protection, Shields of the Lion. Swords of the Thief allow you to regain a luck token you just spent once per day. Sphere of Annihilation is a classic again, so you can fight for control over it with intelligence checks opposed. If the sphere moves into a space occupied by a creature, the creature controlling the sphere makes an attack roll against that creature with a +7, and on a hit, that creature is obliterated completely from existence. You can have Staff of Healing. Once per day, heal 1d6 hit points. I got Creepy Tomes, which has a personality. So this one is fussy and pedantic, constantly tries to escape its owner, and can telepathically reach out in near distance to any creature. You can learn true names of 3 beings you choose. True name. You have advantage on attack rolls and spellcasting checks targeting a creature whose true name you utter. Oh, that's cool. Wand of Warding. Each time you fail a spellcasting check with this wand, you also lose the ability to cast a random spell you know until you complete a rest. But it contains the spells Dispel Magic and Protection from Energy. A Wraith Chain. Once per day, you may cause an attack that hits you to miss instead. Very cool. So that's it, pretty much. Now we've got the character sheet, which as you can see is really, really simple. Basically, you put your talents in a little box on the right. You've got your stats, a slash, and then you put your bonus. Name, ancestry, class, level, XP, current and total, HP, armor class, title, alignment, background, deity, if necessary, your gear slots, and your attacks. And that's it. All handy on one page. But as you can see, this is a complete and awesome game, all in one package. Harking back to the old school while bringing in modern aesthetics, modern sort of quality of life conveniences, and really clear statements of the rules. Yeah, really, really happy with this. The book is fantastic. Obviously, loads and loads of cool content in there. GM screen has wonderful art, as you saw earlier, and has beautiful tools for the GM. And it's just fun to have these extra few classic monsters on these cards. And I think there were maybe some more that are going to come out. I'm sure there's going to be follow-up Kickstarters for this because it was an incredible success for Kelsey, which she deserves because it's really a nice piece of work. And as an OSR player in the past and the owner of a number of different systems for OSR play, really, really glad to have this in my collection. So if you see this in your friendly local store, go and have a look and see if you might enjoy delving into dungeons in the classic style, tracking rations and torches and fighting for your life at every corner with random monsters all over the place. It's a lot of fun. It's a tougher play style, less heroic and bombastic than you might be used to, but it really, can generate incredible stories of fun, heroism, and mayhem at the table. So do go and check out Shadowdark. If you back Kickstarter, you probably already have it, in which case, let me know in the comments what you think of it and your experiences so far. I haven't got it to the table yet because it just arrived to me here in the UK. I think it went out to the US first and then got shipped here via airmail or something. So I'd be really interested to hear how people are getting on with it so far. I think it looks great, very promising, and certainly very complete. So yeah, let me know. And if you want to see more OSR content, I do have some other recent releases and some excellent mainstays in the field like the aforementioned Old School Essentials and others. So in the meantime, take care of yourselves. Hope you had a great Christmas and New Year and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I hope to see you in the comment section below. Please hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed what you saw. So take care and bye-bye.